I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here I am. My name's Jason, and I've been with my wife, Emily, for about 10 years now. We met in college, got married pretty young, and for the most part, I believed we were solid. Sure, sometimes she could be a bitch, bossy, manipulative, and she had this way of twisting things around to make herself the victim. But I loved her, or at least I thought I did. Things weren't perfect, but I figured nobody's marriage was. Lately, though, I started noticing little things that didn't add up. She'd be secretive with her phone more than usual. She'd go out with friends but come back with a different attitude, more distant, less affectionate. She'd keep her phone closed even when we were lying in bed. Small stuff at first, but enough to make me feel uneasy. I wondered if I was just paranoid, but deep down, I knew something was going on. And then came the bigger signs. She started canceling plans, lying about where she'd been. Whenever I asked, she'd get defensive, call me paranoid, or accuse me of not trusting her. But I wasn't imagining it. Something was definitely wrong. It felt like we were drifting further apart every day, and I didn't know why. Sometimes I caught her looking at her phone with a weird, guilty expression. I'd ask her about it, and she'd roll her eyes, give some excuse about being busy or stressed. But I could tell she was hiding something. One night I was home early from work because of a bad stomach. I decided to check her phone, just a glance, nothing malicious. I kept myself away from her notifications, but I saw a message pop up from a number I didn't recognize. It was short, just can't wait to see you tonight, with a heart emoji. My stomach dropped. I stared at it for a second, then just froze. My heart started pounding. I felt like my entire world was tilting. I didn't open the message at first. I just sat there, staring at the screen, trying to process what I saw. Then I decided I needed to know the truth. I waited for her to fall asleep, then snuck into her phone. Her message history with that number was full of flirty, suggestive stuff, more than just friendly. I saw plans for secret meetups, mentions of feeling guilty but wanting to see each other anyway. I felt sick. My mind was racing, trying to figure out how long this had been happening, who this guy was, what she was doing. I didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was right in front of me. She had been cheating on me with some guy, and the worst part was, I knew it was more than just some fling. She'd been lying, sneaking around, betraying everything we'd built. My stomach clenched, and I knew my life was about to change forever. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept going over everything I saw on her phone, every message, every flicker of guilt I could see behind her eyes when I caught her lying. I didn't get angry right away. Honestly, I felt numb. It was like I'd been punched in the gut so hard I couldn't breathe. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I married, was out there secretly screwing some guy. And not just that. She was lying to my face about everything, about her whereabouts, her feelings, her loyalty. The next morning, I knew I had to confront her. I woke up early, made myself some coffee, and sat in the kitchen trying to compose what I wanted to say. But honestly, I was just furious. I felt betrayed, humiliated, like I'd been played for a fool. I kept rehearsing different ways to approach her, calm, angry, accusing. But I knew the truth couldn't be hidden anymore. I had to face her with everything I'd found. She woke up around 8 a.m., yawning and stretching like everything was normal. Her hair was a mess, and her eyes looked tired but still too bright, like she was hiding something. I looked at her and decided I wouldn't hold back. I told her I knew about the messages, about the guy she was cheating with, and that I'd seen enough. Her face didn't change much at first. She rolled her eyes, gave me that typical dismissive smirk, and said, "Oh, Jason, you're overreacting. You're just paranoid." That was the moment I lost it. I told her to stop lying, that I wasn't stupid, and that I knew exactly what she'd been doing. Her reaction was shocking. She started laughing, a harsh, bitter laugh, and said, "You really think I'd cheat on you with some loser? Please. You're imagining things, you're just insecure like always." That's when I saw her face twist, that bitchy smirk she always used when she knew she was getting the upper hand. She looked at me like I was some kind of fool, like I didn't see her for what she really was. I couldn't take it anymore. I told her she was a liar, a cheat, and that I wanted her out of the house. I said I deserved honesty, not her lies and bullshit. She stood there, arms crossed, and said with that same bitchy tone, "Fine. If you want to play detective, go ahead, but you're just making a fool of yourself." Her words hit hard. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and disgust. I was staring at the woman I loved, and I realized I didn't even recognize her anymore. The worst part, she kept denying, kept twisting things around. She said I was paranoid, that I was imagining things, and that she'd never cheat on me. But I saw her guilt, her nervousness, and the way she avoided looking me in the eye. It was all there. I knew she was lying, and honestly, I felt like I was losing my mind trying to believe anything she said after all I'd seen. That's when I decided I needed to figure out what to do next. I knew I couldn't stay in this toxic mess, but part of me still hoped I could somehow fix it, if she was willing to be honest at least. But deep down, I knew the damage was done. The trust was shattered, and I was left with a sinking feeling that everything was over. But my instincts told me I had to be careful to plan my next move. Because if she was cheating, she'd probably try to cover her tracks, and I needed to be ready. After that confrontation, I felt like I was walking around in a fog. My mind was racing, trying to process everything. Her denials, her smirks, the way she dismissed my concerns like I was some jealous fool. But I knew better. I had seen too much. I knew she was lying, and I could feel my gut telling me this wasn't just a one-time thing. No, this was serious. She had betrayed me in the worst way, and I had to do something about it. I started digging deeper. I couldn't just confront her again and hope she'd come clean. That wasn't going to work. So I decided to gather more evidence, hard proof that I could use if I needed to take this further. I installed a hidden camera in her phone in case she slipped up again, and I also revisited the footage from the church's security system. You see, Emily's been going to the church for years. She's always been religious, involved in the community, and had a lot of friends at the church. The thing is, I remembered hearing about the church's security cameras being monitored after hours for safety reasons. Out of curiosity, I looked into it, and to my shock, I found out that the church kept surveillance footage of the pastor's office after hours, records of everyone who entered, and sometimes, footage from the church halls and offices. I decided to check the footage from a couple of nights ago. I knew she'd been going there late, claiming it was for some church business. I managed to access the recordings, and what I saw made my blood run cold. There she was, my wife, going into the pastor's office after hours alone at about 10:30 p.m. The footage was grainy but clear enough. And then around 11 p.m. I saw her and the pastor, Robert, emerging from his office together, both looking flushed and hurried. They left quickly, her hurriedly slipping her coat on, him looking nervous. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The man who'd been counseling us, who I trusted to guide us spiritually, was now caught on camera sneaking out with my wife after hours. My stomach churned. This wasn't just about some emotional affair, this was something way deeper. Infidelity, betrayal, and church secrets all tangled together. I felt sick, angry, and somehow betrayed by everyone I thought I could trust. I started thinking about the implications. What if they'd been sneaking around for weeks? How long had this been going on? Did anyone else know? My mind kept racing with questions, but one thing was clear. She wasn't telling me the truth about where she'd been, and the church's footage proved it. I had enough now. I knew I couldn't stay quiet. I had all the evidence I needed to confront her again, but this time I was going in prepared. I needed to make her face this. I felt rage in my chest, mixed with a deep sense of loss. The woman I married had been lying, cheating, betraying everything. I was furious, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. Something had to change, and I was no longer going to be the fool she thought I was. That evening, I sat alone in my living room, staring at the footage I'd pulled from the church's security system. Watching her and Pastor Robert sneak out of that office after hours made my stomach knot up tighter than ever. I couldn't believe it. This wasn't some innocent flirting, this was real, raw betrayal. I kept rewatching that clip, trying to understand how I missed signs, how I let things get so far. I was mad at myself, mad at her, mad at the whole damn situation. I knew I had to confront her again, but this time I wasn't going in blind. I had proof, irrefutable evidence that she'd been lying about everything, about her visits, about her meetings. I also knew I couldn't just accuse her without being prepared for her reaction. That woman could be bitchy and manipulative, and I didn't want her twisting things around again. So I planned my next move carefully. That night I waited until she was asleep. I took my phone, pulled up the footage, and kept it ready to show her at a moment's notice. When she finally rolled over at 2 a.m., I woke her up gently and told her I needed to talk, serious talk. She blinked at me, groggy and annoyed, and I could tell she was already annoyed because she knew I wasn't in a good mood. I told her I saw everything, the messages, the church footage, everything. Her face froze for a second, then she started lying again, about how she only went to the church for community support, how Robert was just a counselor, how she never meant for any of this to happen. I cut her off. I told her I saw her sneaking out after hours with Robert and that I had proof. Her eyes widened for a moment, then she threw her typical tantrum, calling me paranoid, insecure, jealous. She told me I was imagining things, that I was just overreacting, and that I was making a big deal out of nothing. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I'd seen into her world and I knew the truth. She was cheating on me and she'd been lying about everything, including her so-called help at church. The anger inside me was bubbling over. I felt like I was going to explode. I told her she could lie all she wanted, but I wasn't going to be played anymore. I told her I'd had enough, that I was done pretending everything was okay. And I made it clear I wanted her out of the house right then. Her reaction was classic. She scoffed, called me crazy, yelled that I was overreacting, and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. I sat there, heart pounding, feeling a cocktail of rage and heartbreak. I'd never felt so betrayed in my life. I wondered how I'd let myself get to this point, how I'd missed all the signs and trusted her for so long. And I wondered if I could ever forgive her, or if I even wanted to. For the first time, I saw her for what she truly was, a manipulative, cheating bitch who'd been lying to me from the start. That night, I realized I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. I needed to decide if I wanted to fight for this marriage or just cut my losses. But one thing was clear: my life was never going to be the same again. The days that followed were a blur of anger, sadness, and a strange numbness. I was walking around like a shell of myself, replaying everything: her lies, her sneaking around, the church footage. The betrayal cut deep, and I felt like I'd been punched in the gut so many times I didn't know how to breathe anymore. I kept asking myself why I didn't see it coming, why I trusted her so blindly for so long. Every time I looked at her side of the bed, it felt like a punch to the chest. I started making plans. Honestly, I didn't want to stay in that house anymore, not when I felt so hurt and angry. I decided that I needed to get some space, so I moved out into a friend's place for a little while. I needed clarity. I also reached out to a divorce lawyer, not that I was rushing to get rid of her, but I knew I needed to be prepared for whatever came next. I wasn't about to get played again or let her manipulate her way out of this. Meanwhile, Emily was acting like nothing happened. She tried to play innocent, acting all hurt and betrayed that I would accuse her of cheating. She insisted I was just being paranoid again, trying to spin it so I'd feel guilty for even investigating. She kept telling me I was overreacting, that she loved me, that she'd never do anything to hurt me. Honestly, her words didn't mean much anymore. I saw her for what she was: a liar, a manipulator, someone capable of breaking everything we built without a second thought. But I was determined not to be the fool she thought I was. I kept digging, watching the church footage over and over, trying to understand how deep this thing went. I found out that Robert, the pastor, had been counseling her for months, maybe longer. That made it worse. The thought of him, someone I'd trusted as a spiritual guide, betraying us both in the worst way possible, made my stomach turn. They'd been sneaking around, crossing boundaries I didn't even want to think about. That footage was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. Two people who were supposed to be spiritual leaders, betraying their vows in a church office late at night. The hardest part was the realization that this wasn't just about adultery. It was about a complete breakdown of everything I believed in, everything I thought Emily stood for. I kept going back to the moments I thought were normal: her smile, her touch, her promises, and I knew they'd all been lies. I felt like I'd been living in a nightmare, and I didn't wake up because I didn't want to believe any of this was real. One morning, I finally sat her down, trying to keep my voice steady but knowing I was on the brink of losing it. I showed her the footage, the messages, everything I'd uncovered. Her face, her reactions, everything confirmed what I already knew. She started crying, but it was fake tears, I could tell. She begged, said she was sorry, that she loved me, that it was a mistake she'd never do again. But I'd heard enough. Her apologies meant nothing. I couldn't trust her anymore, and I knew I never would. That betrayal was deep. The decision to push forward was mine. I told her she needed to leave immediately. I wasn't going to stay in a marriage built on lies and betrayal. I told her I needed space, time to heal, and that I'd figure out what was next. She didn't argue much. She knew she'd push me to the edge, and I think a part of her realized she'd lost control of the situation. As she packed her things and left that day, I sat in silence, feeling an overwhelming sense of loss but also a strange sense of relief. I knew I'd made the right choice, even if it broke my heart. Looking back now, I see that this whole thing taught me something about trust, about how fragile it is. Emily was never the person I thought she was. And Robert, that man was supposed to be a spiritual guide, and instead, he betrayed everything he represented. I don't know where I go from here, but I do know I'm stronger than I thought, and I won't let betrayal define me. I just wish I'd seen the signs earlier, but at least now I know the truth. And that's what matters most. Now, sitting here a few weeks later, I can honestly say that the pain still lingers, but I'm starting to piece myself back together. It's like I've been through a storm I didn't see coming, and even though the scars are deep, I'm learning to live with them. I realize how blind I was for so long, trusting someone who was nothing like the person I thought she was. That betrayal cut so deep because I believed in her, in us, in the vows we took. And that makes it even harder to accept that everything was a lie. I've come to understand that people can hide their true selves behind masks, even when they go to church every Sunday and act like they're living a good life. Emily's bitchy, manipulative side came out when she thought she could get away with everything. She lied, cheated, and played the victim until she realized she'd gone too far. Honestly, I don't think she even cares about the damage she caused. She only cares about saving herself, which is why I had to cut her loose. As for Robert, I don't know what to think about him anymore. I used to look up to him, even sought his advice as a spiritual and moral guide. Now I see he's just another human being capable of the worst betrayal. It's a harsh lesson, but one I needed. Trust is fragile, and I learned that the hard way. I see now that I can't fix what's broken, but I can learn from it. I can grow stronger, wiser, and more cautious. This whole ordeal has changed my outlook on relationships. I used to believe in eternal loyalty, but now I know I have to be more careful, more attentive to the signs that someone isn't who they pretend to be. I've also realized that sometimes walking away is the best thing you can do. Protect yourself, preserve your sanity, and find your peace. I won't be rushing into anything new anytime soon. I need time to heal and rebuild. My biggest takeaway: never ignore your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't let guilt or fear keep you silent. Seek the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. Because in the end, knowing the truth, even if it hurts, is better than living behind a mask of lies. And trust me, it's better to be alone than in a life-filled relationship that drains your soul. So here I am, still standing, still healing, still trying to figure out what's next. But I'm proud of myself for facing the truth, for standing up and saying enough is enough. I hope anyone out there in a similar situation learns to trust their gut and doesn't let themselves be deceived by someone they love. Because real strength is knowing when to walk away, even if it hurts like hell. And honestly, I think that's what I've done. I've finally taken back control of my life.